Very good afternoon to all those joining us for this media briefing, where we'll be unpacking and dissecting and breaking down the findings, the latest available findings of the court watching brief unit for the first quarter of the 2023-24 financial year. I'd like to briefly introduce our panel here. Of course, to my immediate left, we've got Premier Alan Winde, and to his left, the Western Cape Minister of Police Oversight and Community Safety, Mr. Regan Allen. I'll indicate at what point we're ready to take questions. If there are questions that you'd like to raise with the panel, you could do so verbally, or you can raise your hand. Those of you joining us online, you can raise your hand, or you can post those questions into the chat box. And if you could just, of course, indicate who the questions are, or your question is directed towards. I'll now hand over to the Minister for Police Oversight and Community Safety, Mr. Regan Allen. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon to everyone. Premier, thank you for your attendance here. We are delighted to be having this particular press briefing. We understand that even during Mental Health Awareness Month, it is so vital to understand that whenever matters are struck off the court road due to inefficiencies, it ultimately leads to trauma and to secondary victimization. And this particular methodology has also been shared with other provinces following the Western Cape government's commitment to ensure that we can help and assist and strengthen the hands of the South African Police Service. We've always been clear that our court watching brief is there to help the South African Police Service. In my engagements with the Provincial Commissioner, it has been very clear that this particular court watching brief unit and this initiative contributes towards accountability, because we are wanting to see that SAPS officers that are not doing their job must be held accountable. There must be remedial action so that the victim, the survivor, can ultimately get the justice that they deserve. In our country, trust in law enforcement, in the South African Police Service, is currently at an all-time low, and this particular initiative contributes to building trust within the criminal justice system. So over the period that we are releasing the information on, we have noted over 21 police stations. There were 63 matters that were struck off the court roll, and those particular matters is deeply concerning because it affects people. And as a Western Cape government, the people-centric government, it affects people. Hence, we have had these engagements with the South African Police Service to ensure that the matters can be reevaluated in order for it to be re-enrolled onto the court roll. It is totally unacceptable that when a case is struck off the court roll due to inefficiencies, which ranges from the docket is not at court, it ranges from when a particular accused is not brought to court, but also when the docket isn't fully prepared for that prosecution to ultimately take place. It is also when we listen to victims and survivors, when they relay stories of secondary victimization, month after month going to a court and not getting the justice that they deserve. And this particular initiative is so vital to making sure that victims ultimately get the justice that they deserve. Colleagues, as you are able to see on the screen, that is a breakdown of the dockets that we have requested. It ranges from Harare, Khayelitsha, Nyanga, Mitchells Plain, Gugulethu, Atlantis. And by now, colleagues will be able to see that this is our priority areas. These are areas where we have seen that murder, GBH, attempted murder, is ranging extremely high. If we can go to the next slide. The number of selected firearm cases per police station, it is in Gugulethu 5, which over the period of 24 September up until the end of September had 2 mass shootings. We also see Atlantis, which is also a lead area, Harare, Khayelitsha, Nyanga, Kraaifontein, all experiencing these similar matters where firearm case dockets were retrieved. The case docket for each of the participating magistrates court, Athlone Court, Khayelitsha and Athlone is the highest with 10, Atlantis 4, but all the way to Philippi with 1. This is the one that we are ultimately wanting to see that matters are not struck off the court roll. And this breakdown of case dockets that were analyzed, we have seen that where a matter has been withdrawn, struck off the court roll, or declined to prosecute was 27. There was one particular guilty verdict in that one, but it brings a total of 28. In terms of incomplete, and these are the reasons for the withdrawal, incomplete investigations. We, as a government, have consistently said that our detective services needs to be fully staffed. We have also released a report that indicates that on average, our detectives sit with a caseload of 200 dockets per detective. Hence, incomplete investigations often feature because our detectives are so overworked as well, but also imitation firearm, which we have seen is being used more often here in the Western Cape, but also when the complainant was not interested or there's insufficient evidence. This illustrates a breakdown of the different categories, and possession of firearm and ammunition amounted to 24 cases, pointing of a firearm to 2, discharge of a firearm 1, and loss of a firearm 2. As a province, we have also reignited our call for communities to provide tip-offs should they be aware of any persons or gang members that is in possession of firearms, because over that bloody week that we saw, 49% of the 130 persons that were murdered in our province, 49% was attributed to firearm injuries. The circumstances under which the crimes were committed, one is where arguments, domestic violence 1, gang-related 2, and other is categorized as at 24. I will now make one final comment, is that it is very clear that from our court watching brief, where we have implemented this initiative, is ultimately to ensure that we can strengthen the hand of the South African Police Service, but also hold SAPS accountable. We have a clear mandate in terms of the Constitution for oversight. The Premier has been very clear that we need to ensure that our oversight leads to better service delivery. And in matters where there's victims, where there's teenagers, where there's young people, often GBH, often rape cases, we are wanting that particular matters and for those victims and survivors to ultimately have peace, ultimately have justice, so that they can ultimately move forward with their lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We'll now hand over to the Premier just to take us through his views on the latest stats over the period under review. Thank you, Premier.
Thank you very much, Regan and Minister Regan Allen. Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm sure everybody knows that safety is and has been one of my biggest priorities for the last 4.5 years. It was something I campaigned on. I still believe that we have to have a change in our policing system. I believe that there should be devolution of policing powers, because this kind of report is something that you need to use as a management tool to say, all right, now what are we going to do about these statistics? What are we going to do about these details that we receive now, where I always say justice delayed is justice denied. Well, when justice or the system fails, then it's not just denied, it's totally unacceptable. And I mean, really, it is probably one of the core problems that we are facing in South Africa when it comes to crime, because it just looks like crime gets worse and not better. And there's no management in the system that says, what are the areas where we are failing our citizens and what are we doing about it, and how are we drilling in to those specific failures? Now, this is one of those tools. And while we can't have devolution, we've shown through the safety plan, we've got a various ranges and categories of interventions, whether it be LEAP officers on the ground in the crime hotspots, or, for example, this specific tool, which is analyzing certain cases in those crime hotspots. So these 21 police stations that are monitored through the 8 courts, when there is an arrest, there needs to be an investigation, and there needs to be not just delayed justice, but there actually needs to be completion of the process. And when we fail our citizens in this space, we've got to fix it. So this tool, I look forward to this report being interrogated in Parliament. I look forward to this report being used as a further lever in our oversight process as a provincial government on following our constitutional mandate of oversight over the police, and maybe even putting further pressure on to say we need to have change. But when I look at this report, when you see why cases have not been completed, or in this case thrown out of court, because there's shortfalls in the system, and the minister spoke about the case docket that police have to face. Well, that's a problem, but it's been a problem for years. We need to fix it. We can't not fix this. Otherwise, exactly what happens in our country is the murder stats get worse, the crime stats get worse, and we need to turn this around. And we need to turn around quickly. So again, I mean, this would be my call to say, we need to look at a new system in South Africa. We need to look at devolution of management so that we can zoom in on these failure areas, so we can bring about justice for those citizens, specifically those citizens who faced some of the worst trauma of their lives. And that's beholden on those responsible. And here it is our court system, and it is our policing system. And so, Minister, thank you very much for this report. This is a key tool in our arsenal. And of course, we can't just make this a document with some numbers on it, where citizens know that they've had us interrogate, investigate, and monitor closely their specific case. But they need to know, now that it has failed, what is happening about it. And so, yeah, we've got to just keep pushing very, very hard to the ministers at national level responsible for two of these spaces, the Minister of Justice as well as the Minister of Policing. We need to make sure that this tool is used there. And as you say, other provinces are also looking at this as well, and we're happy to share. I think this coming out of our own legislation on trying to improve our oversight ability shows that these are effective tools. But now we need to make sure that there's some action following this, because I think, I go through what you've got in the press release and what you've shown. There's the data behind it, and I've gone through and read that data, and you look at each specific case and you think that behind that case is someone who has either lost a family member, and that murder case has now not materialized because insufficient detail or the document, or there's been a failure of the investigation, or that we make a lot of noise in our country about the levels of gender-based violence, and here again you see the ball being dropped. That is absolutely unfair to those victims of these horrendous crimes, and we've got to make sure that these processes run properly, and that justice is not denied. And this is a key tool. So thank you very much for this report. I also look forward to see how this report starts to affect management change at those levels where it needs to be changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you, Minister. I'll now open the floor up to questions from the media. Just to reiterate, you can raise those questions verbally. We do have media present in the room with us, but most of you are joining us online. You can post those questions in the chat box, or you can ask them directly to the panel, but please just indicate who your question is directed towards. So I'll open up the panel now. I do note a question has already come through via WhatsApp. You can also reach out to me via WhatsApp or via email. This one is directed towards Minister Allen. It's more just a point of clarity. I think you had mentioned that we had seen similar initiatives of this nature, court watching brief units, being considered in other provinces. Would you know if this is a matter where we're seeing other provinces, your counterparts in other provinces, have they actually taken that a step further, and have they initiated this the structure in their provinces?
Thank you so much for that particular question. I can confirm that our department has already provided training has already provided documentation to other provinces, and all 8 other provinces actually visited the Western Cape in order to get a full understanding of the methodology used in terms of the court watching brief unit. And from a WINMEC point of view, the National Minister is very clear that what we are seeing and what we have done in the Western Cape is something that should be adopted all over our country. So we've already offered our expertise. We have a number of advocates that deal with these matters and that sit in our court watching brief unit, and that is ongoing in other provinces. I've not seen the official launch of it. We would love to see it being launched in other provinces as a matter of urgency. But I can confirm from our side, we have provided training, the expertise, but also given them the blueprint in order to make sure that they also initiate the court watching brief.
Thank you, Minister. Another question has come through on WhatsApp. Once again, not indicating who it's directed towards, but maybe we can just start with you, Minister, and if the Premier has got something to add to that. Specifically speaking to these cases that are struck off the roll, do we see anything happening beyond that? When we say struck off the roll, does that mean this case, almost in a sense, it disappears? Do we see any kind of efforts from the police service or from the NPA in trying to see that these matters are being brought back into court, or to trying to see that these shortcomings and inefficiencies are dealt with in these cases that drop off the radar?
Quarter by quarter, we do see that a number of cases are re-enrolled. In this particular quarter, we have submitted this to the South African Police Service. The due date for that response was at the end of August. As things stand, we have not received that particular feedback from the South African Police Service as yet, because we are wanting to see that these matters are actually re-enrolled. But the entire assessment we conducted so that we can make sure that remedial action gets taken, so that a person that needs potential training in the detectives gets the necessary help. But if there is consistent failings for disciplinary action to be taken in that regard. But for this specific quarter, we are awaiting the feedback report from the SAPS.
Questions coming through from Heart FM in the chat box here. I might need a bit of clarity from Heart FM on this, but Minister, maybe you can shed some light. It says here the community safety plan indicated that around 50 investigators would be recruited. How many have been employed so far, and have they been approached to help to solve some cases in the province?
Thank you for that particular question. As colleagues will know, that in terms of the Western Cape safety plan, there's different legs and components to it. The one is a law enforcement component. We have a payment transfer agreement with the City of Cape Town, where we ultimately, together with the City of Cape Town, deploy 1,300 LEAP officers. Part of the city's intervention is also the SIMS unit, where they do investigations, where they ultimately ensure that there's information that is collected, but also the work across the City of Cape Town and the City of Cape Town's own watching briefs, also on a number of cases where LEAP officers are arresting and Metro Police are making arrests as well. So that is an integration between the City of Cape Town and the Western Cape government. I would be more than happy to get the exact number of that particular unit in the City of Cape Town, so that we can provide that to HOT.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Because if you remember, that's about seeing the number of cases per investigator. That's about, what can we do to help? There needs to be management decisions at a national level to say more resources must be put in. I mean, Minister, I think the world norm is about 20 cases or less than 20 cases per investigator, and our investigators have got 200 cases. So that is the problem. So how do you fix the problem? And part of it in our plan was to put the extra resources that comes from the city's component that the minister's just spoken about. It's about trying to help so we don't have, incomplete dockets at court, because that's just a travesty.
As the Premier says that now, we are being very conservative when we are saying the 200. I was personally at Philippi SAPS a couple of months ago, and one detective called me over and he said that he's dealing with 400. But obviously the average. So we care for SAPS. We want to ensure that SAPS is ultimately able to do their job. And when we look at priority areas and detectives dealing with that caseload, it makes you angry, but also so that, like the Premier says, the management tools, so that we can ultimately see that justice is served.
Thank you very much. Another question coming through from the Cape Times here. The reporter asks, is the minister zooming in on the Khayelitsha Magistrates Court? A suspect was arrested on the 11th of August, but was released 2 days later after he managed to apparently swap identities with another individual. However, he was gunned down on Friday night in the Lingaletu precinct in Khayelitsha. So I think we can just condense this question into how much of this report, this latest report, zones in on Khayelitsha, and I suppose generally as well, if we look at it from a general point of view.
Thank you so much for that particular question. I will provide the figures for Khayelitsha specifically, but to answer that, seeing that that is one particular matter that is now recent, if I can get that information, I would be more than happy to look into it. But I will also from our side make sure that we engage Khayelitsha, because in my mandate that I've received, the Premier indicated that I'm also needing to ensure that I build solid working relationships across the entire system. So we have engagements regularly with our DPP in the province. We also have regular engagements with correctional services, because we have often seen that when a parolee is released into a priority area like in Nova Park, like Mitchell's Plain, there would then be an increase in sporadic shootings. So we try to zoom in, but I'm more than happy to look into the Khayelitsha matter specifically and provide an update in that regard. But we look at it across the board, and this particular court has looked at Khayelitsha, and Khayelitsha is in our media release as well. And for Khayelitsha, we looked at 4 cases in Harare. There was 5 in Khayelitsha and 3 in Lingaletu West. Thank you.
Minister, another one for you. What role can you play to avoid such things from happening? So I suppose speaking to what you've just to your answer now, but going further, asking what are the problem courts in inverted commas, and what is the plan? Do you think the devolution of powers to the province could in some way help get the justice system back in order?
Thank you so much for that question. We have seen in this quarter, we have over 21 policing precincts that cover 8 magisterial precincts. So we looked at those 8. When we track it back to the previous quarter, we even saw similar inefficiencies even outside of the city of Cape Town. And during the previous quarter, I personally visited one particular police station, which is called the Lutzville Police Station, where we saw at that particular police station and court, there was 12 matters that was struck off the court roll. So we personally went there in order to have these engagements with SAPS at the local level as well. So we try to step in, we try to have these engagements with the DPP, with the SAPS, and I can confirm it's at times extremely heated, because we are wanting to see that it can lead to better service delivery and that the victims can ultimately get the support that they are needing to have. I have briefed the Premier in terms of the secondary question that during last week, after the Premier tabled this at the national Lekgotla, he has consistently asked for the national policing policy engagements to actually happen. That national policing policy engagements happened last week. I personally attended day 2. And in that particular engagements, it became extremely clear that we need a new policing model, that we need to relook at policies that will ultimately be effective. And part of the reason, and the Constitution specifically in 206 of the Constitution, 4C, ultimately says that provincial executives can be allocated policing functions in terms of the national policing policy. So the national minister, in terms of the Constitution, can ultimately ensure that policing policy can indicate that there is functions to a capable government like the Western Cape, because we are wanting to step in and step up. We are going to make written submissions. The Civilian Secretariat has informed me that written submissions will take place after the next 6-week period whereby there is public participation. But during this year and by the end of November, we will definitely be submitting our written comments, which is very clear on what we are wanting to see in terms of national policing policy. And part of that is devolution.
Can I maybe just add to that as well? I mean, obviously, that's something we really push very hard, is we think that devolution of policing powers and the management of policing should happen closer to the citizens where the problems lie. But the question also asked about the courts, and I'm not saying that the courts need to be devolved to local level, although we do have the need for municipal courts for certain specific issues in specific areas. But I think that would almost be a secondary look to say, if we got a change of policing powers, let's see what changes come about. Because I'm serious about this, we really need to be able to change, monitor. 30 years into our democracy, crime's still getting worse and worse and worse. We need to change something. I think secondary to that would be whether we look at changing the courts. I think I would leave that as it is, because imagine if we could just fix some of these things, that in actual fact proper investigations were happening in the police, the courts would have better information, be able to deal with the actual case. Of course, there's another side to the criminal justice system. Once you've been proven guilty, you've then got to go into a detention facility or into a consequence space. That also needs discussion, but I think we're only speaking about devolution in one part of that criminal justice process.
Thank you. Another follow-up question from RCFM directed towards Minister Allen. Have you briefed Provincial Commissioner Betekele about this report? And if so, what was the response? Your response, President.
Thank you so much, RCFM, for that particular question. Yes, I have the letter in front of me. We have submitted this to the PC on the 1st of August, and his reply was due on the 31st of August. I have to date not received that written report as yet, but during our last engagement less than 2 weeks ago, we again discussed the court watching brief unit. And the one question, Premier, that I literally asked to the PC is that, do you see the benefit of this initiative? And there was a resounding yes. So there's a benefit, and the PC sees that benefit, but I've not received a written response, because in our document that we provide to the PC, we actually list each and every court case, and that we are unable to put in the public domain due to confidentiality, but each and every victim's name will be in that particular document. We will put details at the end of that particular report that is submitted to the PC as well.
That's the last question. If there are no further questions from the media, we'll now proceed. We've actually reached the end straight of the briefing. I'll now just ask our panelists if they have any concluding remarks as we end the briefing.
We are very clear. We are observing Mental Health Awareness Month. We would never want any trauma, secondary victimization, and there is literature that confirms that secondary victimization as a result of being a victim can lead to mental health matters, and we are wanting to eliminate that from our society. We are wanting the SAPs, each and every component in terms of the criminal justice system, actually serve the residents. And that's why we have this extra lever to ultimately ensure that there's oversight. Accountability needs to take place, but we are wanting to see a South African Police Service that is professional and that trust can ultimately be forged between communities. Colleagues many will know that rape and gender-based violence is one of the most underreported crimes in our country. And that particular category of crime in terms of GBH features prominently every quarter within our reports, and it could lead to other victims not even wanting to approach the South African Police Service, considering that they have not been helped in the past.
Thank you. I'll also just close. I mean, we are very serious about safety. We want to halve the murder rate. We want to deal decisively with gender-based violence. We want to bring down crime levels. It's the detail that the minister was talking about. When you go into that detail and you see rape case after rape case after rape case and not going any further because insufficient evidence and the docket gets thrown out. Attempted murder cases, shooting cases, murder cases. It really has to change. We've got to build a safer society. We in this province will continue to try new things, to bring about changes in our legislation, to build our own toolkit for oversight while we continue to push for devolution. This is one of those key tools in oversight. And we assure the citizens that we will continue pushing as hard as we can to make sure that we are building a safer Western Cape. That is paramount. That is your primary right as a citizen of our country, you know, to be safe where you live, to be safe on your way to work, to be safe on your way to school. We need to continue to work really hard to build a safer society. Thank you.
Thank you all. And with that, we conclude this media briefing. We will be issuing a statement through the course of the afternoon. So just be on the lookout for that with just a little more detail as to the latest available court watching brief unit stats. Thank you very much for availing yourselves and taking time out to join us this afternoon. Have a good day. Thank you.